We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining Privacy on the AI Frontiers as part of our Talking Data series in honor of Data Privacy Week 2024. Data Privacy Week is an international effort to empower individuals, safeguard assets, and empower trust. Data Privacy Week originated as Data Privacy Day and has expanded into a week-long campaign since 2022. This year's theme is Take Control of Your Data, and it's all about small, actionable steps you can take to be more data privacy aware. And with that, I will kick it off to the NCA's Executive Director, Lisa Flagmeyer.
Thanks, Lucas. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are joined today by Laura Gardner-Rogers, Senior Corporate Counsel for Privacy, Safety, and Regulatory Affairs at a little company called Microsoft that most of us know, and Arjun Bhatnagar, I hope I'm not butchering your name, Arjun, the co-founder and CEO of Cloaked. Can you tell us a little bit about who Cloaked is?
For sure. The little company, Microsoft, doesn't need any description. But we're a company called Cloaked. We're a consumer privacy company. Exactly the theme of the year, trying to give people a way to take back control of their data and their identity. And that's what we're all about, and building a lot of different technologies and products to make that possible.
Great, thank you for being with us today. So let's dive right into some of the questions. This is a really hot topic, and I want to make sure we leave time for Q&A at the end as well. Laura, let's start with you. While there's so much to be excited about as far as AI, there's also obviously some privacy concerns that it brings with it. What are some of the trends that you've noticed as far as privacy is concerned in regards to AI?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa, and thanks for having me. So just first of all, setting the stage, I think we've been talking about AI a lot. AI offers a ton of promise. It can help us advance progress on some of the intractable problems that are facing the globe. It's been used to help make progress on new cures for cancer, develop insights about drivers of disease, provide predictions to protect people from hazardous weather. Those are sort of the societal problems that we're thinking about how we can solve through AI. And then on the everyday scale, there are a lot of Microsoft products that are out there. A lot are under the Copilot name, and those are being used to turn search into a more powerful tool for research and improve productivity for people at work. We found that 70% of the people who are using the Copilot have said that they're more productive at work, which is pretty incredible given how new the product is. So people are still really learning its capabilities. But of course, there are a ton of risks that we also have to think about. We can't just think about these opportunities. We have to think about the potential problems. There are a lot, some are in the privacy world, but there's also undermining information integrity, exacerbating bias and inequality, impacting jobs in the environment. These are all risks that we are trying to consider. Microsoft is both a developer and a deployer of AI, which puts us in a sort of unique spot. And we're committed to ensuring that AI is built and used responsibly and ethically in alignment with core principles such as fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, of course, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. We also believe that these guardrails can't just be developed by technology companies. They need to be developed in consultation and in coordination with governments. In terms of privacy and AI specifically, I think that the advent of AI is really incentivizing individuals and organizations to think more critically about how they're protecting privacy, how they're protecting their data. We're seeing that AI chatbots provide the ability for individuals to more readily surface information that's publicly available, and then copilots can help them do that within their organizations. So all of that is driving people to really think critically about what information they're sharing, if that's sort of externally publicly available information, what are they sharing on the internet? And then within their organizations, what are some of the appropriate permissions and access controls that they need to have in place? What is sort of their data hygiene within the organization that will allow them to utilize these copilots in a way that's going to be responsible?
Arjun, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? What are you seeing from your position?
Yeah, it's a very comprehensive answer, touching a lot of points. I think as Laura kind of highlighted, we're in that new age. I think the last couple of decades, last 15 years, been talked about how the launching of applications, web apps, mobile apps, and how do we bring that into our daily lives. And we've successfully done that. We've reached the saturation point where there's so many apps in our lives that there's only a handful we can actually interact with. And we're now moving to the age of what does AI mean? And now the velocity, veracity, and intensity of data, how do we actually use that to power more richer experience in our lives? And AI is going to capitalize on that for sure. I think the challenge of why we're here all today is around the challenge posed to us as people and how do we think about privacy? For us, and particularly at Cloaked, where myself been thinking about this problem really well, like really strongly, it has to be about the person. I think if you have to think about privacy in AI, it's bring it back to the main problem of privacy we see today is that's always around compliance and security of data, but the underlying theme, and as you talk about the year's theme for take control, the fundamental problem is that we as people don't have control over all this data that's all about us. And I think when you grow an AI, it's being trained and built on information about us as people, because without us as people, this information wouldn't exist. And I think that's where there's a lot of different tools, technologies we can implement and talk about. But the big effort and how we make a big difference around privacy and AI, what does it mean to be an individual as part of this ecosystem? What does it mean to be trained on top of my information? What say, what voice, what actions can I take to so that I feel comfortable in this whole exchange? It's going to come down to comfort. And until we solve that comfort problem, which leads to privacy, AI will always have a big challenge to be integrated into our lives. But we'll see that in work productivity today. I could go on and on, but I think there's a lot of aspects around privacy that there are some really good wins happening, and in some ways we definitely need to improve. And then on the productivity point, I think it comes down to that ultimately privacy and AI have to go hand in hand. AI is growing, privacy will have to grow at the same pace. And in terms of productivity, for seeing a rise in productivity, there's also a gobbling up of data across the board. But it's also not just a brand new problem that we're not seeing before. We're seeing that apps today, your demographic information, your behavioral data, your financial information, personal identifiers, all these things that keep popping up in your privacy issues in apps right now, they're only just getting more and more intense with AI. So there has to be a new dialogue, a new narrative across the board. What does privacy mean? We're moving in the age of AI. What does that look like for us in the future? Somebody, and it's going to be a coalition of companies, organizations, the government that come to this is the answer going forward. But that is going to be the answer, the question that we all ask: what does privacy mean for me? What does comfort mean for me as technology advances?
So as Laura alluded to, right, this is really, really vast, and data, touches every aspect of our lives in the business world. And data is the fuel really behind the AI is running on in order to be effective, right? That's absolutely a necessary component. So what kind of personal data are the models collecting?
So I can jump in, and for any thoughts, so I said earlier, it depends definitely on application use. Every business, I'd say, talking about apps today and just AI, everyone wants to become like Google. Even Microsoft wants to become closer like Google, having all of that data they possibly could to customize, personalize to people. That's a problem we face today. AI only mirrors, and just like the name, it's aggregate-based, large language-based learning on wide array of data. It's going to be training on as much data as it possibly can. Sometimes application specific, but generally you see information about your age, gender, race, ethnicity, your demographics, behavior, how you often use something different across different applications, different things you do, trying to understand that behavior. Your personal information, emails, phone numbers, addresses, credit cards, these are used to correlate data points. These are things that are actively being part of the equation. We saw that thing with incident OpenAI and ChatGPT. When you asked it to say poem infinitely, it started leaking all that personal information. These models, these aspects do carry a lot of weight. They carry a lot of data. We're seeing specific things talking about healthcare and the benefits you're seeing in health, but biometric data, health information, these are being trained. But when you start correlating with a lot of different data points, they start to tell a lot about a person, sometimes way more than they may even know, especially if it's really learning. And you see that the common challenges of location information, your messages, texts, emails, and communication, your financial information. There's models specific to these points, but on average, these things want to gobble up data, just like how the internet's been working for the past 20 years.
Laura, anything you'd like to add? Maybe we should be asking the question, what data does it not collect?
Well, I would first push back on the idea that Microsoft wants to be like Google, or that we just want to collect as much data as we can, right? There is, of course, like you're right, that there is a large quantity of data that is needed to develop the training sets that develop and lead to these large language models that are mostly what I think we're talking about when we're thinking about AI. and GPT or Chat GPT, Bing Chat, all of these are sort of powered from those large language models, and those look across the internet to sort of train, to figure out what does natural language look like, to figure out what is the next, how do I end this sentence? What is this going to look like? And across the internet, there is a lot of personal information. So while these training data sets, a lot of the, the responsible companies that are thinking about how to train AI models are looking at how can we use synthetic data, how can we remove personal data so that we're replacing it with with synthetic data, which doesn't include anyone's personal information. There are challenges with doing that in just sets of unstructured data. There's an ability on the back end to provide individuals rights to be forgotten, to have links removed, to keep them from showing up in terms of what's being returned to them. But it's not foolproof. And I think the what you mentioned, Arjun, about the poem, that's a flaw in the system. And I think we're all learning about how can we improve on these AI systems so that they aren't behaving in that way, because really they're not, or at least the ones that I can speak to at Microsoft, are not intended to be returning personal information or information that's unexpected. It really is intended to act in terms of Copilot and Bing as your trusted co-pilot and returning search results and providing you information about where it found those results and behaving in sort of expected but accelerated ways as a search engine.
So if I'm a consumer, if I'm an individual, and I think about all the data that we've talked about, what can I possibly do to ensure this is being protected? And this is kind of a three-part question. So what can individuals do? What can governments do, or what should they be doing? We'll stick with the US government for now, unless you want to get into other countries. And then what should other technology companies be thinking about? What can we all do to see that the data is better protected than it is today?
So, in some ways, and this is my perspective, Arjun may disagree, but I feel like the AI world just accelerates considerations we should already have in terms of how we're sharing data, right? We should be thoughtful about it. Individuals can use good data hygiene to just be mindful and aware of the information you share, right? If you're posting a photo of your new home, then everyone knows where you live now, right? That's maybe not something that you intended to share when you posted on Instagram this beautiful new house that you purchased, but that's the information that you have shared. And individuals have choices over that, right? You can have a private Instagram account, or you can choose not to share that, and just sort of being mindful about that information, realizing that it is available publicly across the web, using passwords, considering using a password manager, not sharing sensitive data unnecessarily. And then I think when people are engaging with these new AI tools, thinking about the information that they're sharing when they interact with these tools as well, right? To use Copilot and Bing as an example, that's a search engine. There's no need to provide your social security number, unless you are sort of testing for flaws and trying to find vulnerabilities, and leave that to, sort of the red teams that are involved in testing these systems. But you as an individual can choose not to share that information. I think that's really important. And then I think, it's incumbent on organizations to provide consumers with some choices to, if there is something that maybe requires some pieces of information, saying, well, you can have targeted advertisements if you opt into behavioral tracking, but you can also opt out of that so that your information isn't being tracked across your behavior across the web. Or if you would like to delete your information, here is an easily available privacy dashboard, and here's some instructions on how you can do that. So those are all responsibilities that companies have. A lot of them who are already compliant with the GDPR already have a lot of these protections in place. But we're also seeing that is increasingly available across the US, given the number of US state privacy laws that have been enacted. So all of that is totally necessary. And then I think in terms of governments and organizations, I think it's, the government really thinking about what are some of the really risky uses of AI. Where do we need to have a little bit more control? Where do we need to have potentially, should there be audits? Should there be some sort of accountability mechanism? Should there be impact assessments that are being undertaken in terms of how individuals' information is being used by this? And I think that's going to be a collaboration with corporations and with, industry stakeholders and with nonprofits and, with sort of consumer organizations to have those conversations and figure out what the right approach is that enables this innovation, that enables AI that can help us cure cancer, and just increase our productivity with, Copilot and Word that can help you rewrite a document, sort of these really great uses of AI that we're seeing, but also thinking about how it can help individuals protect their data and make sure that that data is protected, that it isn't all on the individual to make those choices, but there are also responsibilities that the companies have.
Yeah, I think very comprehensive answer to quite a bit of a loaded question. So it's definitely interesting. I think you have to really slice the pie in a lot of ways. It's good you mentioned about government, companies, and consumers, because ultimately, I think that's the statement that I try to narrate, and we've done a lot of effort at Cloak to think about. Everyone has a role to play. Now, I have a bit of a distinct stance on this, which is where I break it down, make it a bit simpler. We think about governments. I think the first thing we think about is that what roles need to play. We do know, and I'm not going to shy away from saying is that governments are slow, and they, as we've seen a lot of the Senate testimonies, that there's also a lack of understanding about what to do. Now, one of the things that government needs to really make a big thematic change is that security and privacy are ultimately and fundamentally not the same thing. And that's where I try to make sure it's really strong, is that you can secure your box all day long and you can meet SOC 2, ISO 27001, ISO 27701, a lot of these different compliance, but meeting compliance is basically the bare minimum. Right now, it's the gold standard. And I think that's a different narrative around what can you, like, we've done all the audits and been going through all of them. And it's that we're doing way far beyond than what the audits are actually assessing and testing us on. And I think that perspective is that fundamentally data is generated and created by users creating value, using applications, and ultimately it's really related to our lives. So thematically, what are businesses doing for security compliance? How do you make sure that we're following best practices? I think thematically also coming in is security needs to also not be a privilege. Right now, most companies charge enterprise pricing to just enable basic things like SSO and having managed accounts, which then lead to breaches. Regulatory wise, let's shift that. You can't charge more for security. If everyone's more secure, we've made everything much better. But thematically, thinking about it, government should shift and think about, well, what does data mean for the individual? Do they have a right? Do they have an ability to take back control? When that's the narrative, we're now talking something completely different than meeting the compliance and regulatory needs of the world we are today. So those are actions you could take and thematically how we could change. Companies, I always say, if you invest in privacy today, every dollar you invest in privacy is $2.70 back. Why do I say that out loud? Is that consumers and people and businesses that interact with businesses that invest in privacy, they tend to stay trusted, they stay retained, they want to keep coming back because of a sense of trust. So privacy is not a thing you need to meet to say, let me hit the checkbox. It actually helps grow your business. And if that's the mindset, the way you think about it, how do consumers have a choice? How do you give them control? How do we think about data as a whole, where we're being consumer and people friendly, not just let's gobble everything up? You'll see there's actually a bigger return over time. And I think that's a thing that we don't realize, that it's actually intelligent to invest in privacy. And it comes into making simple changes for people to understand. And I think the biggest voice and the biggest role that comes in at the next decade is ultimately people. They have one of the bigger roles to play today. And I think it comes back to the thing that we just talked about, where you can choose to delete data, you can remove information everywhere. You've got the GDPR requests, the right to be forgotten. I think fundamentally, I have one big problem with that, is that you can't decide between 3 Netflix movies to pick what you're going to watch tonight. What do you mean you're going to look at 15 different privacy toggles across these different websites to figure out what data am I sharing? What am I going to remove? What am I going to manage? So it creates a demand for people to step up and say, no, I need to have an easier way. I don't know why the entire security and privacy landscape is saying, let me focus on training and teaching and changing behavior of the entire population. We haven't done that over billions of years. I don't understand how you're going to go ahead and start changing human behavior. We want to socialize. We want to connect. We want to kind of be out there. How do we institute everyday behavior, privacy by design, into the way we build things and we need to demand it as people, as consumers, users, applications. We need to demand that I have a voice, I have a right, and we show it with actions. And we do this today. We see Alexa and a lot of these technologies starting to decline, where people say, you know what, I don't want that in my home. I don't want to see that. And I think that showing action by taking a stance and saying, I don't need to try that new AI app that might gobble up 6 of my images to show a profile picture, and by some company I've never heard of before, these actions kind of paint a completely different narrative. And this is where we're headed. People tend to not try out technology, try different apps because you gate it with personal information. People don't want to try it. And I think we're seeing that trend happen. And it's good for us to take more and more of those steps. And we can't obfuscate privacy with words like encryption and all these things. We need to make sure that it's by design and people can really intuitively understand it and apply it in their life. If it's going to be behind it, allow all cookies or necessary cookies, I don't think most people understand what cookies are. I don't understand why everyday people or my mom has to click allow all or necessary. That doesn't make any sense because I can guarantee she doesn't know, but we need to think better. And if we demand better, we will see those results.
I think you're right. I use my mom as a litmus test all the time. I think the question that I like to leave people with is, or the statement, I guess, for individuals and for businesses, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? Just because you can make your friends list public, just because you can post that photo on, every social media platform doesn't mean that you necessarily should. And so to slow down a minute, just slow down one beat and kind of think about those things. And I think your point about, governments moving slowly, I mean, the legislation hasn't really kept up with the speed of technology, and I don't see that really changing massively in any kind of way anytime soon. So then I think it becomes a question for organizations, again, just because we can doesn't mean we should, as far as data collection and really asking yourself, like, is this the kind of company we want to be? Like, what kind of company are we? Taking more of a little bit more of an ethical or philosophical approach, like your own sort of policy approach to it, as opposed to waiting for legislation to define who you are as an organization. I think it's really important for organizations to figure out, like, what is their DNA? Like, what do they stand for in this realm when it comes to data collection of privacy and security and AI? And then you make your decisions to align with that, that sort of policy stance that you've taken as for your organization. The other thing that you hit on that I thought was really good is making this easier for consumers. So, if we all got into our cars every day and, reverse wasn't after park or neutral wasn't after park and then reverse and then drive, or I probably mix those up. In the auto industry, we call it the Prindle because that's what it spells. So yeah, park, reverse, neutral, drive, low. If that was different in every vehicle that you got into every day, as consumers, we would pull our hair out. And that's kind of what happens today with security and privacy settings on like every major app that, consumers use. So we have a link on our website on StaySafeOnline.org to one page that gives you direct links to where those settings are on every different popular application you can think of. Because I think we do make that piece really hard on consumers. Sometimes those settings move around. Sometimes an update will break them, and that can be a little bit difficult for people to navigate. So we try to make that easier for people like my mom. In our final minutes here, any final thoughts? We don't have any questions yet. I don't think. Let me double check again. Oh, it looks like we have one. So this is more of a statement than a question. And maybe you can expand on this. I think Microsoft has been working towards that goal of making security more accessible. One example is security defaults. So are you familiar with security defaults at Microsoft, Laura? I'm not sure that I know exactly what the person is referring to.
I mean, I wonder if it's part of the larger conversation, which sort of goes back to what you and Arjun were just talking about in terms of, how things are built by design with private security in mind, right? Like that,
yep.
That these are part of how we are constructing all of our services and products that serve that security and privacy are top of mind. And I think Microsoft has the advantage of having such an extensive scale and such a, really strong security mechanism and security team that we can help to, sort of easily push those out to some of our consumer-facing products as well, right? That we're working at enterprise-grade security, and then we're able to sort of roll out those learnings and those protections across the stack. And then in the privacy space, I think one of the things that I just was thinking about when Arjun was talking about, privacy by design, which is so important, as Microsoft has been committed to the belief that privacy is a fundamental right, but just the idea that you are thinking about how you are, only collecting the data that you need, only using it when you need it, and deleting it if you don't need it, providing consumers the right to delete it, even before that, right? Like we might maintain search results so that it's easier for you to get that same result over and over whenever you're looking for that one thing, or, we know where your location is, you can save that so that it's easy to find the restaurant that you're looking for when you're looking for a Tex-Mex restaurant in Austin, right? That'll easily pop up for you. Or a Tex-Mex restaurant, it'll show you the ones in Austin because that's more relevant to you. So those are just a few thoughts in response to that.
Okay, so final thoughts. What would you like to leave the audience with on how they can be more privacy aware in the day of AI? Arjun, why don't we start with you and then we'll go to Laura.
Yeah, I think one thing is that realizing, one is people, that you don't have to choose between convenience and privacy. Both are possible today. And I think that's a frame of reference that a lot of big tech and everyone says it's only one or the other. And I think the other reference is that data deletion is the only answer. I think there's terms and technologies that are being built, differential privacy, which allows us to share versions of ourselves. I don't need to share my exact location. Can I share a rough version of that? There's things of federated learning for AI. How is it that we don't have one big model learning everything about everyone? We have private models that teach and share insights, versions about ourselves. We think about homomorphic encryption, et cetera, that starts saying, let's stop looking at people's data all the time. Let's look at versions of that data. I think ultimately for us, and what a close part is that, one, privacy is not dead. I think that's one statement I always want to say. And it's like very strong. We always feel like that's true. Every step and action you take now has huge ripple effects. And why is that? Companies don't like, and the internet doesn't like, stale data. It always wants ever-growing present information about you. So even you changing the way you put yourself out there today does make an impact. Why I say that loud is like, that's what we do at Cloaked. We want to change the way you think about it. We don't want to change behavior, change the way you operate. You can actually go ahead and keep the way you're doing today, but introduce privacy by design. Why the fun example I say that's for this call today, I made a brand new phone number just for everybody in this panel. My phone number, I can say out loud, 573-513-8858. You can text and call me, but that number is unique to this audience, and that's it. You can talk to me about AI, et cetera. But we need to keep pushing the boundaries and finding, let's make it convenient, let's make it private, and keep using technology you have today. Just change it so that you don't have to think twice about whether you want to use it or not.
Laura, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone to, well, this is going to sound a little silly, but to try out AI tools and services. I think I want people to be part of the conversation, and for everyone to be able to engage with AI, then they can be engaged in that conversation on how we responsibly harness the technology. If consumers have concerns, then that's something that they can sort of raise up. Those become conversations about what is working and what isn't working. But also, I think a theme that's run through this is using trusted organizations, right? That 90% of consumers will not use companies that they don't trust. If someone is asking you for 6 photos, maybe think twice about whether you need to provide those photos to that organization that company that you've never heard of before. And if you want to do that, then sort of read through the terms, which I know none of us really want to do. So maybe think about whether that's necessary, or, look for alternative verified sources, see if you can find some sort of information about what that company is all about, so that you can understand, what makes sense to share, and think about whether you really need to be sharing that personal information with them.
Yep, take a beat and think. Yeah, that's a tough one because we're all going 100 miles an hour in our world today. I want to thank you both for being with us. We did have some questions come in in the last minute or two, so maybe we'll try and work those into some content or some follow-up. Sorry we didn't get to those in the last minute or two, but I want to thank everybody for being with us, and especially our 2 speakers today. Lucas, do you want to close us out?
All right, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Laura and Arjun, for participating. Here's some additional resources that will go out with our follow-up email that you all can access tomorrow. And this is being recorded and will be available on our website by tomorrow morning. And one last thing, we have one more talking data session tomorrow, so please join us for that. And feel free to follow us on our social media and visit us on our website at StaySafeOnline.org. Thank you all again for joining, and thank you guys for participating.